Hello and welcome to another edition of NYABJ Media Watch. I'm your host, Eric Tait, and with me is our co-host and Media Watch co-chair,
Bob Anthony. Good to see you, Eric.
All right, Bob, here we go with another session. I'm trying to figure out whether we should try to be topical because as we're going to air on this, we've still got that cliffhanger on what the government is doing or not doing. By the time we air on Monday, hopefully it will have been settled. To the non-negative, definitely not to the detriment of the United States of America and the global economy. But my thinking is maybe we could take a step back and look at it in a broader picture, because I was wondering about your take on some of the instant media coverage of the blow-by-blow in its, well, who are the winners and who is the loser, who's winning, who's losing. What's your feeling on the way it has been covered thus far?
The breaking news, I don't think, was covered that well. Actually, I got a lot of my better information off of Twitter and off of some social media than from watching the bulletins on, listening to the bulletins on radio and on TV. This afternoon, they did break into TV as we tape this today. This afternoon, they did break in with the tentative agreement from the Senate to the House to push back the deadlines, basically saving us from going over the fiscal cliff. And I thought that coverage at least was good in that they cut into soap operas and the like with important news, which I don't mind.
Oh, yeah. Well, gee.
It doesn't always happen that way.
Going over the cliff could be something worth breaking into a soap opera to let people know. But of course, I could understand why there might have been a hesitancy to break your local programming, your normal programming, because within the course of the way this thing has unfolded, this manufactured crisis, every time the Senate seemed to have come to some kind of bipartisan agreement and they send it over to the House of Representatives, that bipartisan deal that was struck by Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell always seems to get torpedoed by not John Boehner, but the Tea Party wing of the House, Republican House of Representatives.
That's basically the arm of the House that's shaking the stick at the moment. They're pulling those are the strings that are being pulled. That's keeping us from this agreement being finally.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I remember early on we were talking about how it may or may not have been covered. There seemed to have been some actually fairly decent background, in-depth reporting, not just on cable news, but in the New York Times and some other newspapers, about how we got to this kind of manufactured impasse and how it turns out to be the populist right, far right wing of the Tea Party that just seemed to have descended upon Washington with not any desire to make government function, but possibly with the desire to make government dysfunction. So
I have to agree with you there. I think gridlock is the target. Creating impasses as they have done here that's, I guess, the tactic. Putting roadblocks up and making it seem as if, well, the other side has a chance to correct this if they would only do as we say. And that's not debating, that's...
Yeah, and the actual coverage has been actually astute enough to discern that has been the kind of tactic that's been used.
Through polling and through analysis, sure.
Yeah, they've actually come to the point of saying, well, this isn't an either or, a pox on both their houses. There's a little small faction that's actually causing this. And they've been reporting it from my viewing and reading in a fairly astute manner and trying to disseminate it to the general public. The problem, of course, is the general public is sick and tired of dysfunction in Washington.
Right.
So what have you been seeing on the blogosphere about how fed up the American public has been?
It's been it's good to look on social media to pick up the trends on the different polls that some of the think tanks are doing and some of the university journalism schools are doing as far as what who the public thinks are to blame for this impasse. And you'll see that even among Republicans, the blame is heavily towards the Republicans. Even among people who identify themselves as Republicans, they basically are astute enough, as you said, to understand where the blocks are coming in and who the right wings and the left wings are, and who are the folks in the middle who are at least attempting to quell this. They do get that, but then again, in the blogosphere and social media, you do get the extreme ends as well. You get the people screaming on both ends, and it's up to you as a viewer or a listener to tune that out or tune it in. But it's all out there, which is what I like about this debate in social media.
So, if we take a look at the media itself,
Sure.
with a big magnifying glass with a wide angle lens, then we could, in giving them a report card, as we try to do on Media Watch, folks, we could say that in the instance of this manufactured crisis, it seems as if the general mainstream media and the not so mainstream media seem to have acquitted themselves quite well as far as trying to balance the coverage accurately and in depth. For me, the in-depth part goes to it because I don't know if you saw today's White House briefing as they were talking about a possible deal. And when I say today, folks, we're talking about last Thursday, last Wednesday, rather, as we speak.
Yes.
And a lot of the reporters in that particular news conference kept wanting to press the press secretary, Jay Carney. He says, well, what do you think, Jay? Do you think that despite all this, that the president is a winner on this? And you know,
Yeah.
I get upset when they want to try to make this some kind of game contest.
Right,
on who
as
wins,
if there's a score.
Right, and who loses. And Carney had a very astute answer. He says, look, I mean, there are no winners in this kind of thing. The American people are the losers because of this manufactured impasse. And as a result, we can't sit here talking about who won, who lost,
Right.
when you want to take into account that the economy has been totally fractured and all that momentum may have been lost because of this. For me, you can double check me if I'm wrong, but a better question would be, since Carney and the White House are saying, all right, it's causing the economy, why wouldn't one of those reporters say, all right, Jay, let's talk about that. You keep saying it's impacting the economy. Give us some examples or some projections of where you think this thing has an immediate or long-term effect. That's a question.
Right.
And as opposed to, well, did you win or did the Republicans lose? Let's get some specific questions with some possible grounded answers.
Right, that kind of in-depth reporting would help. For example, I think the meat inspectors, just to pull something out of the air, might not be funded if this government shutdown continues.
They haven't been funded. They haven't been doing their job. So
So
the question is, how long
Right.
is this going to continue, and what are the effects for bad food in the marketplace?
I mean, by law, they may not even be able to ship without an inspection. And then you're creating economic damage at both ends.
Yeah,
People who
yeah.
can't find decent food and people who can't ship their food as they get it from the
people
farmers.
whose food are spoiling on the rack,
On the
and
racks.
so they're losing money.
Absolutely.
Those are the kinds of questions and exchanges that I would expect from supposed astute reporters. But
Right. But instead, we get the score.
yes, it's who's up, who's down. Did the Republicans lose on this, or did they? Well, anyway.
So what do you say, a B plus maybe?
Yeah, I'll give them a B plus for their overall coverage of the manufactured crisis
Right.
on raising the debt ceiling and the continuing resolution to keep the government open. There are some key questions for me that could have been asked, were I sitting in a White House press corps, I'd be asking something to the effect, okay, why are you folk in such a position where you have to be asking for a continuing resolution to fund this government on a 6-week basis?
Right.
Where is our budget? What's
Exactly.
going on? How can we run a country like this?
You're right.
Those are the key questions that they should be asking, not just the White House press secretary, but the Speaker of the House. So
I'm glad you said that. That is a good question. You and I can't possibly run our budgets like that. decide every few weeks how to get through the next few weeks. You would have to, even individuals plan better than that, but yet that's where we are today in our budgeting system.
The House of Representatives are the purse strings holder for the United States government. So even if the president crafts a budget, he has to send it to them for approval because they can say yea or nay. And so therefore, the fact that they have not had substantive budgetary discussions to run this country in over, I don't know how many years. How many years have we been to this? It's at least 2 years.
It's possibly longer than that.
Of no budget for the biggest economy on the planet is just unconscionable. So I guess that's my lecture and opinion for this issue of Media Watch. This is Media Watch, folks. Eric Tait with
Bob Anthony.
And based on the fact that this shutdown may be over when you watch this, and we're certainly hoping it is, and that there is no default on our debt, and they have raised the debt limit. Let's take a look at some other issues vis-a-vis how media has been looking at issues that impact on people of color and issues that we care about. Even within that whole thing, there was a little blurb in Richard Prince's Monday, October 14th, Short Takes column on journalism's. He was talking about taking a report card on who was covering what, on how this shutdown might have impacted blacks and people of color. And what did they find? Who reported what? Bob, you got that handy?
I'm going to look it up as we speak, but I believe he was, of course he comes up with, here we go, right, and he basically found that there wasn't a lot of in-depth reporting as to how it affected the minority, the black community. The reporting wasn't there.
Yeah, there was an interesting footnote to that.
Right, right.
Yeah,
I'll let you get to that.
I think it's Tracy Pollard.
Would you like me? I can read it if you like.
All Digitocracy. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead and read that off.
She basically says, unfortunately, All Digitocracy took a cursory check around to see how black news organizations are covering the U.S. government shutdown.
Tracy Pollard, I think.
Okay, her name is cut off. We apologize for that. Unfortunately, quoting, we didn't find a whole lot specific to black folks. Of particular, however, is the fact that black publications with white owners, bigger budgets, and larger staffs, I assume it says, are providing less shutdown coverage specific to their black audiences than smaller black-owned counterparts that have limited resources. So
that just goes to show you better own your own stuff
if
you want to cover your own story.
I found that a very good little bit of research here.
Hey, it points to the continuing dictum, them that's got gets, and you better get your own so you can do for yourself.
But I'm glad that good reporting does get noticed, even when it comes from a smaller budget, black-owned outlet. Somebody's looking, so keep up the good. In other words, keep up the good work. Those of the low budgets.
God bless the child that's got his own. They'll do for themselves.
Absolutely.
So.
We've seen some of the good coverage in the local, some of it on the local blogs, local publications. So it sort of backs up what she's saying here.
Good. Couple of interesting things. I remember we talked about, over the years we've talked about how the experts and the pundits who show up on the Sunday morning talk shows, week in and week out, are usually 90 to 95% white males over the years, and they've been trying supposedly to break down that lack of diversity. But that same Prince column had some very interesting figures. In the first 9 months of 2013, white men dominated the guest lists on the broadcast network shows and CNN's State of the Union. take it that's the CNN version of the Sunday morning talk shows. MSNBC was the only network achieving notable diversity in guests, particularly on Melissa Harris Perry's show, MHP. Well, Melissa Harris Perry is a African-American female who hosts that show, so I guess she wants to make sure her show is diverse. Republicans and conservatives, continuing on this little survey, showed up significantly more on the broadcast Sunday shows than Democrats and progressives. And that was from Media Matters for America, and they have an ongoing monitoring of the Sunday morning shows and on broadcast and cable networks. So Media Matters does this periodic check, and in its aggregating of their check, Richard Prince kind of paired that with the other finding about the white men dominating the guest list.
So what drives that? Does it mean they have better lobbyists calling in and saying, you got to get my guy on your program? Or is it at the programming end, the folks at these CBS, NBC, ABC not doing their job and reaching out to a diversity of opinion?
I don't know. I used to, in my observation of PBS, not the networks and the cables, PBS would tend to run scared of conservatives and folks from the right-wing side who are always threatening to cut off the PBS funding.
Okay.
And so you would always find that there's always a conservative, whatever, bent. Even when they try to be balanced, they make sure that they always have enough conservatives on whatever PBS public affairs show, whatever opinion thing, to the point where I always found it totally skewed to the right, even though people keep telling me that I'm reading into it. But having dealt with this over the years and knowing that they're always worried about their funding cutting off, I watch them like a hawk. And I can tell you, on PBS's side, they have every reason to worry, because just like the Tea Party tries to shut down the government, conservatives will try to cut off funding for PBS. They've done it time and time again.
The funding has been disappearing for decades.
There's
it's nothing new.
So just from a survival mode, I can understand why PBS would consciously or unconsciously skew towards Republicans, conservatives. Why the networks who just get their money from advertising, from people buying product, would skew that way, I can't even begin to tell you. Now, they still think that there's a liberal bias in mainstream media, at the networks and at CNN and all these places. I can tell you that liberal bias does not exist. And that little report that we just read is perfect proof that liberal bias is a figment of the right wing's imagination or their propaganda.
It's a convenient phrase.
Oh, yes, that's exactly right. But it means their propaganda machine works better than the liberal propaganda machine. That's what that means. And because that propaganda machine works better, that's probably why more of those conservatives end up getting on those shows, because these folks are probably, this is a hypothetical, folks, but
you have some
probably bending over backwards to not be accused of being the liberal media. And so what does that turn out? You end up with more Republicans and conservatives showing up than the progressives. So that's a non-biased survey from Media Matters for America.
Now, we of course, we didn't mention that outlet that's not really a news outlet, which has 3 letters.
You're talking about the Fox organization, but we don't call them a news organization because they don't really do news. Interesting you should mention them. I came across another little blurb on not the October 14th journalism, but one a little later in the week, where the Fox News organization had to do an on-air apology because in one of their broadcasts they had, typical Fox, charged Barack Obama with funding some Muslim museum, which turned out to be wrong. And so they had to go on the air and correct that particular wherever they got that from, they put it out on the air that President Obama had underwritten, funded some Muslim museum.
It's a convenient little tidbit
Hey, just
that plays very well.
Yes, they probably got a lot of, and probably out there in the ether, there's still somebody saying, well, Barack Obama has funded a Muslim museum.
Right.
And we shouldn't keep saying that because people watching this might believe that Barack Obama has funded. But the Fox News organization had to do an on-air retraction of saying such a nefarious thing, which was not correct. And of course, I don't know whether it's nefarious or not. I mean, the Muslim museum may not have had anything to do with terrorism. It may have been a valid museum.
That was going to be my point.
What was the, should we do a little take on where the museum was? What did it have within its doors? What was the theme of the museum? It may have been a harmless.
It could have been a perfectly harmless,
culturally profound museum.
Right.
But because we're now in this country equating Muslim with terrorism, then people will try to make mileage by saying, oh, he funded a Muslim museum. The first take is, so was the museum anything more than a museum? And if so, what was it? And if not, what does it matter?
And the bottom line is the report was incorrect.
And they had to
retract it. And it makes me wonder, as I wonder all the time, whether they have anybody vetting what gets broadcast.
They don't care as long as they get ratings. And they see, on one of our shows, we talked about the fact that the bulk of the American people, which surprised us, and I don't know why it did, but actually terrified me, got the bulk of their news from the Fox Faux News Network.
It's
the bulk of the American people. The bulk.
Or
the larger percentage. The larger percentage. Let me phrase that.
Yes.
As opposed to all the other news organizations.
Right.
They had a larger percentage of viewers than CNN, the three networks, the whole bit. They had a larger percentage.
It is a glitzy network. And I think that's part of what the sells, never mind the content.
I don't know about glitz. It's a propaganda machine. it's not a news organization. We keep saying, folk, it's not a news organization. It's a propaganda machine. And we try to be objective when we make these judgments.
And we're not saying that because we have any enemies there. I know no one at Fox.
I used to know people who worked there, and some of them finally left. I was quite surprised when my former colleague over at ABC, Jeff Greenfield, ended up on the Fox network. And I said to myself, Jeff, I don't know. I don't think that's going to be a good fit. And he was there for a while, but lo and behold, I was correct in my assessment. It was not a good fit.
He wasn't going to be long for an organization like that.
Because he's a news person at heart.
Right.
So I was so glad when he had a parting of the ways with Fox, because it restored my faith in his news credibility and his personal sense of judgment.
Okay, we have about a little less than 5 minutes left.
Well, in the interest of staying on top of who's doing what and how people of color are faring, I saw a report that said that Ray Suarez, longtime senior correspondent for the PBS News Hour, within 2 weeks will be parting from the PBS.
From the News Hour?
From the News Hour. Ray just finished this series on, he did the companion book for Latin Americans, that series I think it was a 6-part series that PBS just aired. And he did the companion book. And Ray's been a long time, we might as well give Ray his due, because he's been one of the most professional and stellar people in broadcast news over the years. Ray started, I believe, at ABC Radio back in the days when I was over at the ABC Network. And I think he went from there to CBS Radio. I think he went to NPR.
Okay.
And I believe in '96 is when he joined PBS as one of their on-air correspondents. And he's been there since something like '96, senior correspondent, filling in and doing phenomenally great work. So it's going to be interesting to see who replaces Ray Suarez in that chair. If you think about it, besides Gwen Ifill, there is one other person of color. That's Kwame Kilpatrick. Is that his last name?
No, that would be that's
No,
former
wrong
mayor. Yes,
Kwame. Yes,
right, exactly.
yes,
Exactly.
that's the gentleman who does their news recap segment.
Right. I know who you mean. I'm blanking on the name as well, but it's not the mayor of Detroit.
Yes, definitely not. Let me not go there.
Yes.
And that's, for me, the only other person of color. Sri Srinivasan is now the weekend anchor.
Harry.
It's, Harry, Sri's brother, Sri. Harry is Sri's brother, yes. Yes, Harry Srinivasan.
Okay.
Relative, I think it's a brother.
Yes.
We'll double check that, get back to you on that, folks.
Sri is at the Met.
Sri is now at the Met, no longer at Columbia J School.
Right.
Very, very, we call him the digital guru of gurus.
Absolutely.
That's Sri. And Harry, who is a relative of Sri, I think a younger brother, but I'm not sure, but a relative, is now doing the weekend chores for the PBS News Hour.
Okay.
So you have a male anchor for PBS who is not a white male, and you have a black female and a white female doing the weekday anchors for PBS. And so the PBS network is the only major television network that does not have a white male anchor anywhere in its. Now that's very interesting.
Yes.
So that's probably a first for U.S. broadcasting territory.
Right. And it's nothing. Nobody's being given any gift here. Everyone is qualified for their seats.
They all earn their positions
as we get close to about a minute left here.
Yeah. It's interesting. In this 1 minute, I can tell you I was at a panel discussion night before, like it would be last Wednesday night when you hear this, at the New York Urban League Young Professionals, and the topic of their discussion was the images and portrayal of people of color in the media today. So it's of concern to young people. It's of concern to all people of color, and the fact that we're still having to have this discussion, and the bulk of the concession was it was predominantly negative at that discussion. So the fact that in 2013 we're still having that discussion means we still got a long way to go.
But it's something we can take up next week, I guess.
Yeah,
or
we
in 2
can
weeks.
continue. We can continue to hit the topic and do what we need to do.
So
this has been NYBJ Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And it's been produced by EBT Educational Productions in association with NYBJ, and we'll catch you the next time.